The day I came home and saw my dead father's tools piled on the driveway like rubbish, I knew my marriage was over. Not suspected. Not wondered. Knew. There were wooden crates stacked beside the bins. Dusty boxes with my dad's handwriting on them. A cracked toolbox he had owned since before I was born. His old radio. The chair he used to sit in when his knees hurt. And beside all of it, leaning against the garage wall, was a brand new pink sign. Kayla Rose Beauty Studio. Kayla. My husband's sister. The woman who had never paid rent, never kept a job longer than 6 months, and once said my father's workshop smelled like old man sadness. I stood there with my suitcase in one hand and my keys in the other, staring at the sign like my brain couldn't translate what I was seeing. Then the garage door opened. Music spilled out. Bright white lights. Mirrors. Pink walls. A nail desk. A ring light. And in the middle of it all, my sister-in-law Kayla was taking selfies in the room where my father taught me how to sand wood without leaving scars. She looked up, saw me, and smiled. Not guilty. Not nervous. Smiled. Then she said, "Surprise. We finally made the space useful." Useful. That word hit me harder than if she had slapped me. Because that garage had never been just a garage. It was my dad's workshop. And everyone in my husband's family knew that. My name is Hannah. I'm 32. My husband, Ryan, is 35. Or I should say, he was my husband. When I met Ryan, I thought he was the first man who understood that love could be quiet. He wasn't flashy. He didn't make big promises. He didn't try to impress me with money or status or nonsense. He was calm, steady, funny in a dry way, and kind to waiters. At 28, after years of dating men who treated basic respect like a monthly subscription, steady felt like magic. Ryan knew I came with grief. My dad had died 2 years before we met. His name was Peter. He was a carpenter. Not the fancy kind with a showroom and expensive clients. The real kind. Sawdust in his hair. Pencil behind his ear. Hands permanently rough no matter how much cream he used. He built kitchen cabinets. Fixed broken stairs. Made shelves for neighbors who paid him in tea and biscuits. And when I was little, he let me sit on an overturned paint bucket in his workshop and watch him work. He used to say, "Wood tells you what it wants to be. You just have to shut up long enough to hear it." I thought that was the funniest thing in the world. My dad talking to wood like it had opinions. But as I got older, I understood what he meant. Some things can't be forced. You have to listen. The workshop was behind the small house I grew up in. A brick garage with a blue door, 2 dusty windows, and shelves full of tools that looked ordinary to everyone else. To me, it was sacred. After my mom left when I was 9, that workshop became the place where everything felt okay. Dad would make me hot chocolate in an old chipped mug and let me sand offcuts while he worked. When I was sad, I went there. When I was angry, I went there. When I was confused, I went there. And when Dad got sick, he spent as much time there as his body allowed. Near the end, he couldn't lift heavy wood anymore. But he still liked sitting in the workshop with the radio on, telling me which tools needed oiling, which screws went where, which clamps were older than I was. A week before he died, he made me promise something. He was sitting in that old chair, wrapped in a blanket even though it was June. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. He pointed at the walls, at the benches, at the tools. Then he said, "Don't let anyone turn this place into storage." I laughed because I thought he was joking. He wasn't. He said, "People will see empty space and call it potential. But it's not empty. It's full of your life." I cried then. He didn't like seeing me cry, so he got grumpy and told me to stop leaking on the floor. That was Dad. He could be dying and still act like feelings were a plumbing issue. When he passed, he left me the house. Not because it was worth a fortune. It wasn't. It was an old 2-bedroom place with uneven floors, a tired kitchen, and a garden that turned into a swamp every winter. But it was ours. Mine and Dad's. And the workshop came with it. The solicitor told me Dad had been very clear. The house was mine alone. He had written a note with the will. One line. Keep one place in the world that nobody can vote you out of. I didn't fully understand that sentence then. I do now. When Ryan and I got serious, I told him about the house before he moved in. I said, "This place is mine. Not because I don't trust you. Because my dad wanted me to have somewhere that stayed mine." Ryan held my hand and said, "I would never take that from you." I believed him. For the first year, he was respectful. He didn't push to redecorate. He didn't complain about my dad's photos. He didn't make jokes about the workshop. Sometimes he even helped me restore small pieces of furniture in there. He wasn't good at it, but he tried. The problem was his family. Ryan came from a family that used the word support the way some people use a crowbar. His mother, Denise, believed family meant nobody was allowed to say no. His younger sister, Kayla, believed family meant everyone else existed to fund her next reinvention. Kayla had been a makeup artist, then a lash technician, then a content creator, then a crystal healer, then a brand strategist, which, as far as I could tell, meant posting quotes online and charging people for advice she didn't follow. She was 29, beautiful, dramatic, and allergic to consequences. Every few months, she had a new dream. And every few months, Denise expected everyone else to help make it happen. When Kayla wanted to start a lash business, Denise asked Ryan for money. When Kayla wanted to go on a networking retreat in Spain, Denise asked Ryan for money. When Kayla wanted to buy a camera for content, Denise asked Ryan for money. And because Ryan hated conflict, he usually said yes. At first, I tried to be understanding. It was his money. His sister. His choice. But after we got married, his choices started touching my life. One month, he couldn't contribute to the boiler repair because he had helped Kayla with something urgent. Another month, he asked if we could postpone a holiday because Kayla needed help with a salon course. Then came the workshop. It started as a joke. At least, that's how Ryan presented it. One Sunday dinner, Kayla was complaining that she couldn't take clients at home because Denise's living room lighting was tragic. Denise sighed and said, "It's such a shame, Hannah has that big garage just sitting there." I looked up. Ryan looked down. Kayla's eyes lit up. I said, "It's not sitting there." Denise laughed. "Oh love, it's full of dusty old tools." I said, "My dad's tools." The table went quiet in that fake way families go quiet when they want you to feel rude for defending yourself. Kayla tilted her head and said, "I didn't mean it like that." She absolutely meant it like that. Ryan squeezed my knee under the table. I knew what that meant. Don't react. Keep the peace. I moved his hand off my knee. For the next few weeks, the comments continued. Kayla would say things like, "Imagine how cute that space could be with mirrors." Denise would say, "Your dad would probably want it used, wouldn't he?" Ryan would say, "She's just dreaming out loud." Then one night, Ryan brought it up properly. We were eating dinner. He had made pasta, which usually meant he wanted something. He said, "What would you think about letting Kayla use the workshop just temporarily?" I put my fork down. "No." He blinked. "You didn't even hear the idea." I heard enough. He sighed. "Hannah, she's trying to build something. It would just be a few clients a week." I said, "No." He said, "The space is wasted." I looked at him. That was his mistake. The space is not wasted because it doesn't make your sister money. He leaned back. I didn't mean it like that. I said, "Then mean something else." He got quiet. Then he said, "You know, sometimes it feels like I live in a museum for your dad." I stared at him. He looked immediately regretful. "Hannah, I'm sorry. That came out wrong." But sometimes wrong words are only wrong because they escape too honestly. I said, "That workshop is the one thing I asked you not to touch." He said, "I know." I said, "Then stop asking." For a while, he did. Or I thought he did. Then, in March, my company sent me away for 3 weeks to help open a new branch in Edinburgh. I didn't want to go, but the promotion attached to it was too good to refuse. Ryan acted supportive. He helped me pack. He drove me to the station. He kissed me goodbye and said, "Don't worry about anything here. I'll hold down the fort." I remember smiling at that. The fort. My dad used to call the house that. While I was away, Ryan seemed normal. He called every night. Sent pictures of the dog. Complained about work. Asked how training was going. Once, I asked why the workshop camera was offline. I had a little security camera in there, mostly because the tools were valuable and the back gate lock was old. Ryan said the Wi-Fi extender had stopped working. I said I'd check it when I got back. He changed the subject. Another warning I ignored. On the train home 3 weeks later, I felt excited. Exhausted, but excited. I had missed my house. My bed. My dog. The smell of old wood in the workshop. I even bought Ryan a bottle of whiskey from a small shop near the station. That bottle stayed in my suitcase for 2 months after everything happened. I never gave it to him. When the taxi pulled up, the first thing I noticed was the driveway. It looked wrong. Too crowded. Too messy. Then I saw the crates. Then the tools. Then the sign. Kayla Rose Beauty Studio. For a second, I thought maybe they had only decorated the outside. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe there was an explanation that wouldn't make me want to peel my own skin off. Then Kayla opened the garage door. And I saw what they had done. My father's workbench was gone. The shelves were gone. The pegboard where every tool had its place was gone. The old radio was on the floor beside the bins. The walls were pink. Not soft pink. Aggressive, glossy, influencer pink. There were vanity lights drilled into the brick. Fake plants hanging from the ceiling. A velvet chair in the corner. A neon sign that said, "Pretty hurts." And right where my dad's lathe used to sit was a marble effect nail station. Kayla smiled and said, "Do you love it?" I couldn't speak. Ryan came out behind her. His face changed when he saw mine. Not guilt. Fear. He said, "Before you get upset." That sentence did something to me. Before you get upset. As if my emotions were the problem arriving too early. I walked past them into the garage. The smell was gone. The sawdust. The oil. The old wood. Gone. It smelled like paint, acetone, and cheap vanilla candles. I turned slowly. "Where is my dad's workbench?" Ryan said, "We put it in storage." I said, "Where?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "A unit." I looked at Kayla. She suddenly became very interested in her phone. I said, "Which unit?" Ryan didn't answer. That was when I knew. I walked back outside and opened the nearest crate. Inside were random things. Dad's sanding blocks. A broken clamp. Some old screws. Stuff they didn't think mattered. But the important tools were missing. The chisels. The planes. The lathe. The router table. The handmade mallet Dad carved his initials into. Gone. I asked again. "Where are his tools?" Kayla said, in that airy voice people use when they want to sound innocent, some of it was really old and unsafe. I looked at her. "Where are his tools?" Ryan said, "We sold a few things." The world went quiet. Not silent. Quiet. Like my body had shut off sound to protect me. "You sold my father's tools?" Ryan stepped forward. "Hannah, listen. Most of it was just sitting there. Kayla needed startup money for the studio, and we thought." I slapped him. I had never slapped anyone in my life. I'm not proud of it. But I won't lie and say I regret it. Kayla screamed, "Oh my God." Ryan touched his face and stared at me like I had betrayed him. That was the strangest part. He looked betrayed. I said, "Get out of my house." His expression hardened. "Our house." I laughed. It came out sharp and ugly. "No, Ryan. My house." He said, "We're married." I said, "And you're trespassing on the one boundary I gave you." Denise arrived 20 minutes later. Of course she did. Kayla must have called her. She came storming up the drive like she owned the pavement. "Hannah, what is wrong with you?" I was standing beside the crates, still in my coat, still holding my suitcase handle. I said, "Your son sold my dead father's tools and turned his workshop into a salon." Denise looked at the sign and actually smiled. "Well, at least it looks alive now." I stared at her. She continued, "Your father is gone, love. Kayla is here. You can't keep clinging to dead things forever." That was the moment I stopped feeling frantic. Not calm exactly. Something colder. I said, "You should leave." Denise scoffed. "This is family property now." Ryan whispered, "Mom." Too late. I turned to him. "What does that mean?" He wouldn't meet my eyes. I repeated, "What does that mean?" Kayla started crying. Not because she felt bad. Because she could sense consequences entering the room. Denise lifted her chin. "It means Ryan is your husband. This house is part of your marriage. You don't get to act like a dictator because your father left it to you." I looked at Ryan. "Is that what you told them?" He said, "I didn't say it like that." But he didn't deny it. I walked into the house. Straight to the office. Ryan followed me. "Hannah, please don't do this right now." I opened the filing cabinet. Pulled out the folder. The deed. The will. The prenuptial agreement Ryan had suggested we sign because he said it would make me feel safe. At the time, I thought it was thoughtful. Now I wondered if he had simply never expected me to use it. I opened the folder on the kitchen table. Pointed to the documents. "This house is mine. It was mine before marriage. It remains mine. You signed that." Ryan's face had gone pale. He said, "I know, but..." "No. There is no but after a signature." He sat down slowly. That was when the dog came running in from the garden. Milo. My dad's old collie, technically mine now, but he had been Dad's dog first. He sniffed my suitcase, wagged his tail, then pressed himself against my leg. That almost broke me. Because Milo used to sleep in the workshop while Dad worked. Even the dog knew that room mattered. I didn't cry in front of Ryan. I didn't give him that. I told him to sleep somewhere else. He said I was overreacting. I said, "You sold my grief for Salon shares." He laughed. But not before saying the sentence that made everything easier. "You care more about dead tools than your living family." I said, "No. I care more about respect than people who use the word family to steal. He slammed the door. That night, I sat on the kitchen floor with Milo's head in my lap and finally cried. Not pretty crying. Not dignified crying. The kind that hurts your ribs. I cried for Dad. For the workshop. For the stupid hot chocolate mug. For the workbench I used to sit under as a child. For the fact that my husband had spent 3 weeks destroying something I had protected for years and somehow expected applause. At 2:14 a.m., I got up. Grief is strange like that. 1 minute you're on the floor. The next minute you're making a spreadsheet. I listed every tool I could remember. Every machine. Every hand plane. Every clamp. Every sentimental item. Then I searched Facebook Marketplace. It took 9 minutes to find the first listing. Old carpenter tools. Job lot. Collection only. The photo showed my dad's toolbox. I knew it immediately because of the dent near the handle. The seller was Ryan. Not even Kayla. Ryan. He had sold my father's tools from his own account. I found more. The lathe. The router table. A box of chisels. A vintage Stanley plane Dad used to call the old soldier. Some were already marked sold. I screenshotted everything. Then I checked the shared bank account. That was mistake number 2 for Ryan. He had paid for part of the salon conversion using joint money. Mirrors. Chairs. Nail equipment. Paint. Electrical work. A professional sign. All while I was away earning the promotion that helped pay our bills. But the worst thing wasn't the money. It was an email. I found it because Ryan had left his laptop open in the office. I know some people will say I shouldn't have looked. Those people have probably never come home to a neon sign inside their dead father's workshop. The email was from a local small business grant program. Kayla had applied for funding. The application listed the business address as my house. The property owner consent form had my name on it. And underneath my name was a signature. Not mine. A bad imitation of mine. I stared at it for so long my eyes started burning. Ryan hadn't just disrespected me. He had forged my signature. That was the moment the story changed. It wasn't only a marriage problem anymore. It was a legal one. The next morning, I called my solicitor. Her name was Priya. She had helped with Dad's estate years earlier. I explained everything as calmly as I could. Halfway through, she interrupted me and said, Hannah, did you say forged consent form? I said yes. She went very quiet. Then she said, do not confront them about that yet. So I didn't. For 3 days, I did exactly what Priya told me. I documented. Photographed the garage. Photographed the crates. Saved the marketplace listings. Downloaded the grant application. Got bank statements. Called buyers and tried to track the tools. Some people were kind. One man had bought the lathe. When I explained, he said, I thought it was odd. Bloke seemed in a rush. He sold it back to me for what he paid. Another had bought the chisels. He refused to return them. I don't blame him, really. He had paid. But it still felt like losing Dad again in pieces. Ryan kept texting. At first angry. Then guilty. Then angry again. You can't just kick me out. Kayla has clients booked. You're embarrassing me. Mom says you need grief counseling. Can we just talk like adults? That last one made me laugh. Like adults. Adults don't forge signatures and sell dead men's tools. Denise sent long messages too. Her favorite line was, you are punishing Kayla for being brave enough to start something. I replied once. Kayla can be brave somewhere else. Then I blocked her. Kayla, meanwhile, posted a video. That was her mistake. She filmed herself in the garage, smiling under the neon sign. The caption said, sometimes the universe gives you a space before you even know you need it. So grateful for family who believes in my dreams. I watched it 3 times. Then I saved it. Because there she was, publicly admitting she was using the space. Comments were full of hearts. So proud of you. You deserve this. Dream Studio. I wondered how many dreams are built on someone else's grave and still get heart emojis. The grand opening was scheduled for Saturday. I knew because Kayla had made a whole event page before I got home. Kayla Rose Beauty Studio launch party. At my address. Without my permission. Priya advised me to let it happen just long enough to collect evidence. I didn't like that. Every part of me wanted to rip down the sign, throw the chairs into the street, and paint the walls black. But Dad used to say, if you're going to cut, measure twice. So I measured. On Saturday, cars started arriving at 2. Kayla had balloons. Pink cupcakes. A Prosecco table. A photographer. Her friends. Denise. Ryan. Even a few clients. They were standing in my garden, taking pictures like my pain was a venue. I watched from inside the house with Priya beside me. She wore a navy suit and the expression of someone who charged by the hour and knew she was worth it. At 2:30, Kayla went live on Instagram. That was perfect. She smiled into the camera and said, "Welcome to the official launch of Kayla Rose Beauty Studio. This space has been such a journey, and I'm so grateful to my brother and sister-in-law for helping me create my dream." My sister-in-law. Me. The person who found out after the fact. Priya looked at me and said, "Ready?" I wasn't. But I nodded anyway. We walked out. The garden quieted almost immediately. Ryan saw Priya and his face changed. Denise came over first. "Hannah, please don't make a scene." I said, "Why does everyone in this family keep doing things in public and then asking me not to react publicly?" Kayla lowered her phone slightly, but she was still live. Good. I walked past Denise and stood in front of the garage door. Under the pink sign. Kayla said, brightly, "Hannah, this really isn't the time." I said, "That's funny. I thought the same thing when I came home to my father's workshop destroyed." The people in the garden went silent. Kayla laughed nervously. "Destroyed is a strong word." I turned toward the open garage. "You painted over his measuring marks on the wall." Nobody understood that except me. But that was okay. I understood. On the left wall, near the bench, Dad had marked my height every year from age 6 to 16. Tiny pencil lines. Dates. My initials. Gone under pink paint. That hurt more than the tools. Because tools can sometimes be bought back. But a wall remembering your childhood can't. Ryan stepped forward. "Hannah, let's talk inside." I said, "No. We'll talk here." Priya handed him an envelope. Then one to Kayla. Then one to Denise, because apparently Denise had co-signed some of the business paperwork. Priya said, "These are formal notices requiring immediate cessation of business activity at this property, removal of all unauthorized fixtures, and preservation of evidence relating to the unauthorized property alterations, sale of personal items, misuse of joint funds, and forged owner consent documentation." Kayla whispered, "Forged?" Denise looked at Ryan. Ryan looked at me. There it was. That tiny flash of panic. I said, "You signed my name." Ryan said, "It wasn't like that." Priya said, "It was exactly like that. I could have kissed her." Kayla started crying. "My clients are here." I said, "So was my father's workshop." She snapped, "Oh my God, it's a garage." The whole garden heard her. The photographer slowly lowered his camera. Kayla realized immediately that she had said the quiet part too loudly. I walked toward her. "No, Kayla. To you, it's a garage. To Ryan, it was free space. To Denise, it was proof I wasn't family enough to say no." I pointed to the crates by the bins. But to me, it was the last room on earth where my dad still felt close. Kayla's face twisted. For a second, I thought maybe she felt something. Then she said, "I'm sorry you're sad, but you can't hold everyone hostage to your grief." And just like that, any guilt I had disappeared. I said, "You're right. I can't. But I can hold you to the law." Ryan said, "Hannah, please." It was the first time he sounded truly scared. Not of losing me. Of consequences. I turned to him. "You sold his tools." He said, "I was trying to help my sister." "You forged my signature." "I thought you'd come around." "You lied to me for 3 weeks." "I didn't want to upset you while you were working." That almost made me laugh. How considerate. Denise stepped in. "Marriage is compromise." I looked at her. "No. Marriage is not breaking into someone's heart and calling it renovation." Nobody spoke after that. Then Priya said the sentence that ended the party. "Everyone who does not live here needs to leave the property now." One of Kayla's friends whispered, "Are we trespassing?" Priya smiled politely. Yes. People started leaving. Fast. Cupcakes were abandoned. Prosecco glasses left on tables. The photographer packed up like the building was on fire. Kayla stood frozen in the middle of her dream studio while the dream walked out through the garden gate. Her live stream had ended at some point. But not before enough people saw. By evening, the sign was down. By Monday, the locks were changed. By Wednesday, Ryan received divorce papers. By Friday, Kayla posted a statement saying she had been forced out by a toxic relative who weaponized grief. That video got sympathy for about 20 minutes. Then someone uploaded a clip from her live where she said, "Oh my God, it's a garage." The comments changed quickly after that. People asked why she had opened a business at someone else's house. Why the owner didn't know. Why her brother signed paperwork. Why the space had to be that specific garage. Kayla deleted everything. Denise called from a private number. I answered by accident. She was crying. Not angry crying this time. Real crying. She said, Ryan could get in serious trouble. I said, yes. She said, you wouldn't do that to your husband. I said, he did it to himself. She said, he loves you. I looked out the kitchen window at the garage. At the pink paint still bleeding through the first layer of primer. Then I said, he loved what I would tolerate. Denise said I was cold. Maybe I was. But after people burn down your boundary, they don't get to complain that you stopped being warm. The next few months were ugly. Divorce always is when one person wants accountability and the other wants amnesia. Ryan apologized. Then blamed Kayla. Then blamed his mother. Then blamed money stress. Then blamed my grief. Then blamed the fact that I had never truly made the house feel like ours. That one almost got me. Because part of me had always feared that by keeping the house in my name, by protecting the workshop, by holding on to Dad, I had somehow failed as a wife. Then Priya reminded me of something simple. She said, a loving partner does not need ownership to feel included. I wrote that down. A loving partner does not need ownership to feel included. Ryan eventually admitted to signing my name. He said he thought it was just a formality. He agreed to pay back a portion of the money, including what he could from the tools. Not all of them. Some were gone forever. That still hurts. The old soldier plane never came back. Neither did Dad's handmade mallet. For weeks, I couldn't go into the workshop. Even after Kayla's furniture was removed. Even after the mirrors came down. Even after the neon sign was gone. The pink walls were still there. The holes from the vanity lights. The chemical smell. The blank spot where the height marks used to be. I thought restoring it would make me feel better. But at first, it made me angry. Every brush stroke of primer felt like erasing proof. Every box I unpacked reminded me of what was missing. Then one Saturday, my neighbor Mr. Ellis knocked on the garage door. He was in his 70s and had known Dad for 30 years. He walked in, looked around, and said, "Bloody hell." That was all. Then he came back an hour later with a toolbox. For the next month, he helped me rebuild the workshop. Not exactly as it was. That was impossible. But close enough that the room started breathing again. He found an old workbench from a retired carpenter. Not Dad's, but solid. He helped me hang new pegboard. He gave me 3 of his own clamps. He even brought an old radio and said, Peter would hate the sound quality, which means it's perfect. I laughed for the first time in that room. A real laugh. The kind that surprises you. One day, while sanding the new bench, I found myself talking to the wood. Not out loud exactly. Just in my head. Asking what it wanted to be. And I remembered Dad saying you have to shut up long enough to hear it. So I did. The divorce finalized 8 months later. Ryan sent one final email. It was long. Messy. Probably written after therapy or after too much whiskey. He said he understood now that the workshop wasn't just a room. He said he was sorry he made me feel like my grief was an inconvenience. He said he wished he had protected me from his family instead of protecting them from my reaction. Then he wrote, I think I wanted the house to feel like mine, and I confused that with making you prove I mattered. That was the first honest thing he had said. I cried when I read it. Not because I wanted him back. Because for 1 second, I saw the man I thought I married. I replied with 2 sentences. I hope you keep learning. I hope you never do this to anyone again. Then I blocked him. Kayla tried to restart her business from a rented room 6 months later. It failed. Not because of me. Because rent is expensive when you can't steal the building. Denise still tells people I destroyed her family. I don't correct her anymore. People who want the truth can find it. People who want a villain can keep me. As for the workshop, it's mine again. Different. Scarred. But mine. The blue door is back. The pink is gone. The new workbench sits where Dad's old one used to be. On the wall where my height marks were painted over, I hung a framed copy of Dad's note. Keep one place in the world that nobody can vote you out of. Underneath it, I added my own note. Especially if they call the vote family. Milo still sleeps in the corner when I work. Sometimes, when the radio crackles and the room smells like sawdust, I can almost feel Dad there. Not like a ghost. Like a habit the house remembers. Last week, I finished my first real piece since everything happened. A small oak table. Nothing fancy. Tenon joints. Simple legs. Smooth top. I almost sold it. Then I decided to keep it in the kitchen. The first night I ate dinner at that table, alone but not lonely, I finally understood something. Ryan and his family thought the workshop was valuable because it was free space. They thought grief was just clutter. They thought love meant access. They thought marriage meant my boundaries became shared property. They were wrong. Love doesn't ask you to destroy the last thing your father left so someone else can take selfies in it. Family doesn't sell your memories and call it support. And a husband who needs you to surrender sacred ground to prove you love him was never standing beside you. He was standing at the door with a measuring tape, waiting for you to leave. So yes, my husband turned my late dad's workshop into his sister's salon while I was away. Yes, he sold the tools. Yes, he forged my signature. Yes, his mother said I was choosing dead things over living family. But they forgot one thing. The house was mine. The workshop was mine. The grief was mine. And this time, so was the ending.